So that's just our summary of the basic idea we've been using. The last couple of days, we've been trying to take these things and somehow balance them out so that something is the same in the problem, which makes the comparison easier. I want to come back. I might actually have to zoom this out just a tiny bit. I want to come back to our very first Carlos situation. When we did this the first time, we were explaining it visually in words. You guys had some short calculations, but it was much more informal. I took away your formal tools so that you could focus on what was actually happening, focus on the logic. Some of you guys were using some shorthand to kind of pull things out of the problem, and that shorthand looked an awful lot like equations, because the equations that you can make for this basically are just the shorthand abbreviation, if you will, for the information in the problem. So if I take this, here's my first receipt. Carlos bought 3 bags of Tabitha tidbits and 4 bags of Figaro flakes for $43. So I could say, okay, 3 bags of Tabitha tidbits and 4 bags of Figaro flakes, and my total was $43. Oh, look, I just made an equation, right? So I said the equation basically is just the abbreviated version of the words in the problem almost. I could abbreviate my second receipt too, and then it becomes an equation. So the second receipt, we had 3 bags of Tabitha tidbits and 6 bags of Figaro flakes for $54. When you guys did this problem, what you guys came up with and what you explained and shared up here, you guys noticed that the Tabitha tidbits were the same, which means the price difference has to be coming from the Figaro flakes. So the way I could show that, if I wanted to show that with numbers and with symbols instead of with words, I'm going to cross that out just as a reminder that that's not actually controlling the price. That's kind of neutral because I have the same amount in both receipts. The next thing you guys did was you found the differences, right? You said, okay, here's the difference in price and here's the difference in the number of bags. That's just simple subtraction, right? I could make this look more algebraic. The way this is lined up, so most of you guys said, okay, $11 price difference for 2 bags of Figaro flakes. So that you should already have that on your paper. If I want to make that look more formal, I can take these equations and literally subtract them, and it's doing the exact same subtraction that you did in your logic strategy. Find the difference in bags and the difference in price that matches with that. Where this gets a little weird, the way I wrote the equations out, is if I literally subtract these and I do 4 minus 6, what's going to happen? Yeah, so if I literally think of this from an algebraic standpoint, it gets a little weird for a minute, but it actually works out okay because I have a negative here and a negative here. So what's going to happen by the end of the problem? Yeah, so sometimes depending upon what order you stack these up, you might kind of get some negatives that seem a little weird when you connect it back to the situation, but they actually work themselves out. If I had written these the other way around, so if I had the second receipt on top of the first receipt when I subtracted, then I wouldn't have to worry about that. But the big idea here is that if I literally go through and subtract these, once I have something the same, it's going to tell me here's how much and here's how much it costs so that I could go from there. Technically, I kind of am subtracting these, but what happens when I do 3 minus 3? 0, which just verifies the fact that the Tabitha tidbits aren't affecting the price because they eliminate, which is where the elimination strategy comes from. The next thing you guys did here was you said, okay, if 2 bags of Figaro flakes cost $11, then I can just chop that in half to get 1 bag of Figaro flakes, right? So algebraically, this gives you a one-step equation, and I know I have negatives, but they work out. So the Figaro flakes for $5.50 a bag. The exact same steps you guys explained, we're just going back and documenting it with numbers now. Find the difference in bags, find the difference in price, divide. I want to show you how, you guys also explained how to get the Tabitha tidbits, and I want to show you guys how that looks if I take that and I document it with numbers instead of words. I know I have this zoomed out a little bit, but that's because I have to put something aside. I'm going to move the problem out of the way, now that we got that. Once I know what the Figaro flakes are, I can come back to one of the receipts and get the Tabitha tidbits, which is basically exactly what you guys did, but we can show our work for that step. So if I take this, so I know 3 bags of Tabitha tidbits and 4 bags of Figaro flakes, which happen to cost $5.50 a bag, we now know. I paid a total of $43, right? So Figaro flakes are $5.50 a bag. How much would 4 bags cost? So that means my Tabitha tidbits plus $22 of Figaro flakes gave me my total of $43. Okay, that looks like a 2-step equation. What would I do? Yeah, which makes sense if you connect it back to the problem. What I'm doing is I'm just taking the Figaro flakes out of my total so that the amount that's left is going to be the Tabitha tidbits, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be 21. So that means these 3 bags of Tabitha tidbits had to cost me $21. 3 bags are $21. How much is 1 bag? $7. Yeah, just divide. So the Tabitha tidbits were 7. This part over here is almost untouched from what you guys explained when you were up here sharing how you did that. Almost these exact calculations people had on their papers. Once I have one, I can drop it back into the situation and get the other thing, get the other half. This is kind of a trade-off from substitution. Some of you might think, well, that's a lot of work to get that second one. The thing you have to realize if you're going to compare these strategies, substitution is a lot of steps to get the first number, and then the second number is really fast because you just fill it in. Elimination is almost the other way. Getting the first number is really fast because it's just usually it's just some subtraction and division, which you can do pretty quickly, right? But then the second number is going to be a little more work. So labor-wise, substitution and elimination are kind of equal because both of them have one half that's a little faster to find and one half that you have to work a little harder for. It's just which half is harder and which half is easier kind of flip-flops with the strategy. I want to put one more in here. So this is our first situation, just translated into numbers. So we can see we just end up subtracting as long as we have something the same, and then we can just track through our equation steps and it'll do all of our logic for us. I want to see if we could take Carlos's second situation because there's one more thing that we need to talk about. How do I document that logic with numbers? This is Carlos and the Brutus Bites and the Lucky Licks. We've got 2 receipts. We can make 2 equations again, right? 2 bags of Brutus Bites, 3 bags of Lucky Licks cost us $42.50. So all I'm doing is I'm just documenting my purchases in numbers. That's what the equations are. My second one, I had 5 bags of Brutus Bites, 6 bags of Lucky Licks, and then I paid $94.25. This guy, I'm going to move this out of the way now that we've got it documented. This guy, you guys shared a couple of different ways. We had more than one person come up and share this. And the general theme that you guys figured out with this, to jar your memory, is that I have to have something be the same. Most of you guys, when you did this, you went for the Lucky Licks because you noticed that one purchase, the Lucky Licks, was double the other. So we had some people that said, well, I'm going to chop the second receipt in half. And we had other people that said, well, I'm just going to buy twice as much on the first receipt. Either way, we end up making the Lucky Lick amounts the same, right? I'm going to go for doubling because if I chop in half, what's going to happen? Decimals versus doubling, what's going to happen? Whole numbers people like better than decimals, right? So we know that if I could buy twice as much on this first receipt, the Lucky Licks would be the same. We need to talk about how to document that with numbers. So if you're going to duplicate something, so double it, triple it, 4 copies of it, 5 copies of it, whatever you need, the way I can show that when I'm documenting my work with numbers is to take whatever I want copies of and just show how many copies. So in this case, I want to double it. So times 2, I need 2 copies of that. So I'm showing that I'm going to take 2 copies of that whole thing. But now I have to actually show what my new total is if I buy twice as much. So if I buy twice as much, now instead of 2 bags, I have 4 bags. And instead of 3 bags, now I have 6 bags. And my total's also going to double, right?
Yeah.
This is where this gets a little weird, and there's a little bit of repetition built in the interest of organizing your work. I doubled this. I didn't double the second one, but I'm going to rewrite it below this just so I have them next to each other so that my comparison is clear. So I'm just rewriting. But now, oh look, the Lucky Licks are the same. So that means the Lucky Licks are not controlling the price difference. The Brutus Bites are.
The what?
The Brutus Bites. That was the other type of food. It was Brutus Bites and Lucky Licks, which is why we're using B and L. Now this is just right back to what we did with the first one, right? This is the same, so now I can subtract them. And this temporarily goes negative, but if you'd done it the other way, it wouldn't. Basically, what we're figuring out is 1 bag of Brutus Bites is going to cost us the difference between those, $9.25. And I know those are negative, but you could easily fix the negative. Brutus Bites, $9.25. Right? Because these receipts were exactly identical except for 1 extra bag of Brutus Bites, which means that had to be the price difference. Once I know the Brutus Bites, I can get the Lucky Licks by dropping it back in and figuring it out from there, just like we did before.